The crack of a rifle pierces the air, followed by an eerie silence. In the distance, a German soldier crumples to the ground, his life extinguished in an instant. Amidst the smoke and chaos of the battlefield, a figure moves with practiced stealth through the underbrush, her keen eyes already searching for the next target. This is no ordinary soldier. This is Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the deadliest female sniper in history. A woman whose name would strike fear into the hearts of her enemies and inspire hope in her comrades. As we delve into Lyudmila's extraordinary story, we find ourselves transported back to the tumultuous years of World War II. The year is 1941, and the world is engulfed in the most devastating conflict humanity has ever known. Nazi Germany, drunk on its early victories in Western Europe, has just launched Operation Barbarossa, its massive invasion of the Soviet Union. As millions of men march to war, one woman is about to etch her name into the annals of history. Born on July 12, 1916, in the small Ukrainian town of Biela Tserkva, Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko entered a world on the brink of monumental change. The Russian Empire was in its death throes, with the Russian Revolution just around the corner. As a child, Lyudmila witnessed the birth of the Soviet Union, a new world order rising from the ashes of the old. These early years, marked by rapid social and political transformation, would shape the woman she would become. From a young age, Lyudmila displayed a fierce determination and a competitive spirit that set her apart from her peers. She excelled in school, her sharp mind eagerly absorbing knowledge in a wide range of subjects. But it wasn't just in academics that young Lyudmila shone. She was an avid athlete, participating in running, gymnastics, and pole vaulting. This physical prowess, combined with her mental acuity, would serve her well in the years to come. However, it was a chance encounter in her teenage years that would set Lyudmila on the path to becoming a legend. When a boy in her neighborhood boasted about his skill with a rifle, Lyudmila's competitive nature was ignited. Determined to prove she could be just as good, if not better, she joined a local shooting club. Little did she know that this casual competition would one day save her life and the lives of countless others. As Lyudmila honed her marksmanship skills, she also pursued her education with vigor. By the time war broke out, she was a student at Kiev University, studying history. Her dream was to become a teacher, to shape young minds and pass on her love of learning. But fate had other plans for Lyudmila Pavlichenko. When news of the German invasion reached Kiev, Lyudmila didn't hesitate. She was among the first to volunteer for service, presenting herself at the recruiting office with a determination that would become her hallmark. However, her path to the front lines was not without obstacles. The recruiters, seeing a young woman barely in her 20s, tried to steer her towards becoming a nurse. But Lyudmila stood her ground, insisting on joining the infantry. It was here that her years of marksmanship training paid off. When asked to prove her skills, Lyudmila demonstrated such proficiency with a rifle that the recruiters had no choice but to accept her into the 25th Rifle Division of the Red Army. In a matter of days, the university student had transformed into a soldier, ready to defend her homeland against the Nazi invaders. The reality of war hit Lyudmila hard and fast. The theoretical knowledge of conflict she had studied in her history books paled in comparison to the brutal realities she now faced. The sights, sounds, and smells of the battlefield were overwhelming. The constant threat of death, the loss of comrades, the physical and emotional toll of combat, all of these tested Lyudmila's resolve to its limits. Her first days at the front were a baptism of fire. The German army, with its superior equipment and battle-hardened troops, seemed unstoppable. Lyudmila found herself in a desperate defensive action near Odessa as Soviet forces struggled to halt the Nazi advance. It was here, amidst the chaos and carnage of battle, that Lyudmila would take her first life. The moment is etched forever in her memory. Through the scope of her rifle, she saw a German soldier advancing. Time seemed to slow as she steadied her breathing, took aim, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil of the rifle, the muzzle flash, and then the sight of the enemy soldier falling. It all happened in an instant, but the impact would last a lifetime. In later years, Lyudmila would recall the complex emotions that washed over her in that moment. There was no joy in taking a life, no sense of triumph. Instead, she felt a grim determination. This was war, and she had a job to do. Her skill with a rifle could save the lives of her comrades and help push back the Nazi invasion. Personal feelings had to be set aside for the greater good. As the battles raged on, Lyudmila's reputation began to grow. Her accuracy was uncanny, her ability to remain calm under fire remarkable. Fellow soldiers started to take notice, and soon her name was being whispered with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Here was a warrior who could strike fear into the hearts of the enemy, a guardian angel watching over her comrades. If you're captivated by Lyudmila's incredible journey so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the rest of this extraordinary tale of courage and skill in the face of overwhelming odds. Life as a sniper was a unique kind of hell. Lyudmila spent long hours in hiding, often lying motionless for days at a time, waiting for the perfect shot. The physical discomfort was intense, baking under the summer sun, freezing in the winter snow, always fighting off exhaustion and the urge to move. But even more challenging was the mental strain, the constant vigilance, the knowledge that a single mistake could mean death, the weight of responsibility. All of these pressed down on Lyudmila day after day. Yet, she persevered. With each successful mission, her confidence grew. Her tally of confirmed kills rose steadily. 50, 100, 200. Each shot was a precision strike against the Nazi war machine, each life taken a grim necessity in the defense of her homeland. But the cost of war was high, and Lyudmila was not immune to its toll. She saw friends and fellow soldiers fall, their lives snuffed out in an instant. The faces of the dead, both friend and foe, haunted her dreams. Lyudmila coped by focusing on her duty, channeling her grief and anger into her marksmanship. Her rifle became an extension of herself, a tool of vengeance against those who had brought such devastation to her country. Despite her growing skill and reputation, Lyudmila was not invincible. She was wounded multiple times during her service. Each injury was a stark reminder of her mortality, a moment when the fine line between life and death became crystal clear. Yet each time, after recovery, she returned to the front lines. Her country needed her, and she would not be found wanting. One particularly harrowing experience occurred during a fierce battle outside of Odessa. Lyudmila had taken up position in the bell tower of an abandoned church, using the height advantage to pick off enemy soldiers attempting to flank her unit. For hours, she maintained her position, ignoring hunger, thirst, and fatigue. As night fell, she heard movement below. German soldiers had entered the church. Heart pounding, Lyudmila knew she was trapped. To move would give away her position, but to stay meant certain discovery. In that moment, she made a decision that would become legendary among her comrades. Using all her skill and stealth, she managed to slip out of the bell tower and down through the church, right past the enemy soldiers. As she emerged into the night, she even managed to take out 2 more targets, sowing confusion among the German ranks. This incident not only added to Lyudmila's growing reputation, but also highlighted the psychological warfare aspect of her role. The mere knowledge of her presence on the battlefield began to affect enemy morale. German soldiers spoke in whispers of the Soviet Lady Death, a shadow that could strike from anywhere at any time. This fear became a weapon in itself, sometimes as effective as Lyudmila's marksmanship in disrupting enemy operations. As 1941 gave way to 1942, the war entered a new phase. The initial German advance had been slowed, but at a terrible cost. Millions of Soviet citizens had been killed or displaced, vast swathes of territory had been lost, and the Nazi war machine seemed far from defeated. It was in this context that Lyudmila found herself transferred to a new and even more challenging battlefield, the city of Sevastopol. The siege of Sevastopol would prove to be the crucible in which Lyudmila's legend was forged. This vital Black Sea port was a key strategic objective for both sides. For the Soviets, it was a lifeline, a symbol of resistance against the Nazi onslaught. For the Germans, it was an obstacle that needed to be eliminated, a thorn in the side of their conquest of the Crimean Peninsula. Lyudmila arrived in Sevastopol in early 1942, just as the German noose was tightening around the city. The situation was dire. Supplies were running low. The civilian population was suffering, and the defenders were vastly outnumbered. But Lyudmila's arrival brought a spark of hope. Her reputation preceded her, and her presence bolstered the morale of the beleaguered defenders. The siege of Sevastopol was unlike anything Lyudmila had experienced before. The urban environment presented new challenges and opportunities for a sniper. The bombed-out buildings provided countless hiding spots, but also meant that the enemy could be lurking around any corner. The constant bombardment from German artillery and aircraft added another layer of danger to an already perilous situation. Lyudmila quickly adapted to this new battlefield. She became a ghost, moving silently through the ruins of the once beautiful city. Her days fell into a grim routine. Before dawn, she would leave the relative safety of the Soviet lines, making her way to carefully chosen positions. Sometimes she would spend an entire day in one spot, patiently waiting for the perfect shot. Other times, she would move frequently, striking from multiple locations to keep the enemy off balance. The physical demands of her role were immense. Lyudmila often had to crawl through debris-strewn streets, climb crumbling buildings, and lie motionless for hours in uncomfortable positions. The summer heat was oppressive, made worse by the need to remain camouflaged and hidden. She learned to ignore the thirst that clawed at her throat, the hunger that gnawed at her stomach, and the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm her senses. One particularly harrowing day stood out in Lyudmila's memory. She had taken up position in the attic of a partially collapsed apartment building. The space was tight, filled with dust and the acrid smell of smoke. Through a small hole in the roof, she had a clear view of a key German supply route. For hours, she lay there, her eye pressed to her scope, watching and waiting. As the sun reached its zenith, Lyudmila spotted movement. A German officer, distinguishable by his uniform, was surveying the area. This was a high-value target, one that could significantly impact the enemy's operations. Lyudmila steadied her breathing, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. Just as she was about to take the shot, a loud crack echoed through the attic. Part of the weakened floor had given way, sending debris clattering to the level below. Lyudmila's heart raced. Had she been discovered? She remained perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. Finally, confident that her position hadn't been compromised, she refocused on her target. The officer was still there, now looking wary, his hand on his holster. Lyudmila took a deep breath, exhaled halfway, and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, and the officer fell. In an instant, chaos erupted on the street below. Knowing her position was now compromised, Lyudmila had to move quickly. She disassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, stowed it in her pack, and began her perilous journey back to Soviet lines. As she climbed down from the attic, she could hear German soldiers entering the building. Her path of retreat was cut off. In that moment, Lyudmila's training and instincts took over. She found a hiding spot amidst the rubble, covering herself with debris. For hours, she remained there, scarcely breathing, as German soldiers searched the building. She could hear their footsteps, their voices growing louder and then fading away. The stress was almost unbearable, but Lyudmila knew that a single sound, a single movement, could mean her death. As night fell, the search seemed to taper off. Lyudmila seized her chance. Moving with utmost stealth, she crept through the darkened building. Every creaking floorboard, every shifted piece of rubble, sounded to her like an explosion in the quiet night. Finally, she made it to the street, slipping from shadow to shadow, every sense alert for danger. Her journey back to Soviet lines was a nightmare of close calls and heart-stopping moments. At one point, she had to hide in a bombed-out cellar as a German patrol passed by, so close she could have reached out and touched them. In another instance, she had to cross an open square, her heart pounding as she sprinted from one patch of darkness to another, always expecting to hear the crack of a rifle or the shout of discovery. When Lyudmila finally made it back to friendly territory, she was exhausted, dehydrated, and on the verge of collapse. But she had survived, and her mission had been successful. The German officer she had eliminated turned out to be a key logistical coordinator, and his death threw the enemy's supply lines into disarray for days. This was just one of many such experiences for Lyudmila during the siege of Sevastopol. Each day brought new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities to strike at the enemy. The psychological toll of this type of warfare was immense. Lyudmila lived with the constant knowledge that each day could be her last. The slightest mistake, a moment's inattention, could mean death. Yet she persevered, driven by a deep-seated determination to defend her homeland and a growing hatred for the invaders who had brought such destruction to her country. The nights were often the hardest, in the quiet darkness. When the gunfire and explosions finally died down, Lyudmila was left alone with her thoughts. The faces of those she had killed haunted her dreams. She saw them in startling clarity. The look of surprise, fear, or sometimes simple nothingness as life left their bodies. She grappled with the moral weight of her actions, questioning whether the ends truly justified the means. But then she would remember the atrocities committed by the invaders, the lives destroyed, the cities reduced to rubble. She thought of her comrades, fighting and dying to protect their homes and families. In those moments, her resolve would harden once again. She was a soldier, doing what needed to be done to defend her people. The enemy had brought this war to her doorstep, and she would make them pay dearly for every inch of Soviet soil. Lyudmila's reputation grew with each passing day. Among her fellow soldiers, she was seen as a guardian angel, a protector who could strike down the enemy before they even knew they were in danger. To the Germans, she became a terrifying specter, a deadly ghost that could strike from anywhere at any time. They gave her nicknames: Lady Death, the Bride of Silence, each one a testament to the fear she inspired. It was during the siege of Sevastopol that Lyudmila faced her greatest challenges as a sniper. The Germans, recognizing the threat she posed, began to actively hunt her. They brought in their own snipers, setting up duels that would become the stuff of legend. These confrontations were nerve-wracking games of cat and mouse, where the slightest error meant certain death. One such duel stood out in Lyudmila's memory. For 3 days, she played a deadly game of hide-and-seek with a skilled German sniper. Both knew the other was out there, waiting for the tiniest mistake. Lyudmila barely slept, constantly changing positions, always on guard. The mental strain was almost unbearable. Every shadow could be her enemy, every glint of light a potential rifle scope. On the first day, Lyudmila caught a glimpse of movement in a building across the street. She fired but hit only air. The German was good, very good. He had used a decoy to draw her fire and reveal her position. Lyudmila barely had time to roll away before a bullet struck the spot where her head had been moments before. The second day was a tense standoff. Neither sniper dared to move, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. Lyudmila lay prone on the cold floor of a burnout factory, her muscles cramping, fighting the urge to shift position. She knew that even the slightest movement could catch her opponent's eye and spell her doom. As the third day dawned, Lyudmila was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but she refused to give up. She knew that her opponent must be feeling the strain as well. It would come down to who could hold out longer, who could maintain their focus in the face of extreme fatigue. It was late in the afternoon when Lyudmila's patience finally paid off. A cloud passed over the sun, momentarily changing the light. In that brief moment, she caught a flicker of movement, a shifting shadow where there should have been none. The German sniper had finally made a small error, exposing himself for just a fraction of a second. It was all Lyudmila needed. Her shot found its mark, ending the duel and adding another tally to her growing list of enemy snipers eliminated. The victory was bittersweet. Lyudmila felt no joy in the kill, only a grim satisfaction that she had survived, that she could continue to protect her comrades. She also felt a grudging respect for her fallen opponent. In another life, under different circumstances, they might have been friends, fellow sportsmen comparing notes on marksmanship. But war had made them enemies, had forced them into this deadly contest. These victories came at a cost, however. The constant stress, the lack of sleep, the inadequate food. All of these began to take their toll on Lyudmila. She lost weight, dark circles formed under her eyes, and her hands developed a slight tremor that she had to consciously control when taking a shot. But still, she fought on. Her tally grew to 300 confirmed kills, including 36 enemy snipers. Each kill was meticulously recorded and confirmed. This wasn't out of a sense of macabre pride, but rather a grim necessity of war. The Soviet command needed accurate intelligence on enemy losses, and Lyudmila's records provided valuable information on German troop movements and officer locations. The process of confirming a kill was often dangerous in itself. After making a shot, Lyudmila or a spotter would have to visually confirm that the target had been neutralized. This often meant exposing oneself to enemy fire, if only for a few seconds. It was a risk that had to be taken, both for the accuracy of the records and to ensure that a wounded enemy soldier couldn't pose a future threat. Lyudmila's most challenging kills were often the enemy snipers. These duels required not just marksmanship, but also cunning and psychological warfare. She had to outthink her opponents, to predict their movements and anticipate their strategies. It was a deadly chess game played out across the ruined cityscape of Sevastopol. One of her most notorious battles was with a German sniper who had been terrorizing Soviet troops for weeks. This sniper was crafty, never staying in one place for long, using elaborate decoys to confuse his hunters. Lyudmila spent days studying his patterns, learning his habits, waiting for her chance. The opportunity came on a foggy morning. The mist provided cover, but also made visibility poor. It was a double-edged sword, offering concealment, but also increasing the risk of walking into an ambush. Lyudmila moved carefully through the ruins, her senses on high alert. She had deduced that the German sniper favored elevated positions with multiple escape routes. With this in mind, she focused her attention on a partially collapsed office building that fit the profile. As she approached, she noticed something odd. A curtain in a third-floor window moving slightly, despite there being no wind. Lyudmila's instincts screamed at her. This was it. She took a position behind a burned-out car, her rifle trained on the window. For hours, she waited, ignoring the cramp in her legs and the sweat trickling down her back. Finally, as the fog began to lift, she caught a glint of sunlight on metal, a rifle barrel, ever so slightly protruding from the window. Time seemed to slow down. Lyudmila took a deep breath, steadied her aim, and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, shattering the eerie quiet of the misty morning. There was a moment of absolute stillness. Then the rifle barrel disappeared from the window. Lyudmila waited, her heart pounding. Had she hit her target, or merely alerted him to her presence? The minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. Then, slowly, a dark stain began to spread on the pale curtain. Her shot had found its mark. This victory was particularly sweet for Lyudmila. Not only had she eliminated a dangerous enemy, but she had also avenged several of her comrades who had fallen to the sniper's bullets. It was moments like these that reinforced her resolve, that reminded her of the importance of her grim work. The stories of Lyudmila's exploits began to spread, not just among her fellow soldiers, but across the entire Soviet Union. In a time of darkness and despair, her courage and skill provided a much-needed spark of hope. She became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person could make a difference. Soviet propaganda made much of Lyudmila's achievements, holding her up as an example of the strength and determination of the Soviet people. Her image appeared on posters. Her exploits were recounted in newspapers, and soldiers told tales of her incredible shots around campfires at night. For Lyudmila, this fame was a double-edged sword. On one hand, She was proud to serve as an inspiration to her people, to give them hope in dark times. On the other hand, she was uncomfortable with the glorification of killing, no matter how necessary it might be in wartime. She was acutely aware of the human cost of war, having seen it up close through her rifle scope. Despite her growing fame, Lyudmila remained focused on her duty. The siege of Sevastopol was reaching its climax, and every defender was needed. The Germans, frustrated by the city's stubborn resistance, intensified their attacks. The bombardment became almost constant, turning the city into a hellscape of fire and rubble. As we approach the final, desperate phase of the battle, remember to subscribe to our channel. The conclusion of Lyudmila's incredible story in Sevastopol is something you won't want to miss. It was during this final, desperate phase of the battle that Lyudmila faced her greatest challenge yet. Cut off from the main Soviet forces, she found herself leading a small group of soldiers and civilians, trying to break through the German lines to safety. For days, they played a deadly game of hide and seek with the enemy, moving only at night, scrounging for food and water where they could. The group consisted of a mix of soldiers and civilians, men, women, and even a few children who had been unable to evacuate earlier. Lyudmila felt the weight of responsibility for each of their lives. Her skills as a sniper were now put to a different use, not just killing the enemy, but ensuring the survival of her group. Their journey through the ruins of Sevastopol was a nightmare of constant danger. German patrols were everywhere, and the sound of gunfire and explosions was never far away. Lyudmila led the group from shadow to shadow, using every trick she had learned to avoid detection. One night, as they were crossing a particularly exposed area, they heard the sound of German voices approaching. There was no time to find cover for everyone. In that moment, Lyudmila made a decision that demonstrated her courage and leadership. She ordered the group to hide while she created a diversion. Moving away from the group, Lyudmila deliberately made noise, drawing the attention of the German patrol. As bullets began to fly around her, she led the Germans on a chase through the ruins, away from her hidden comrades. It was a terrifying experience, using every bit of skill and knowledge she had acquired to stay just ahead of her pursuers. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, Lyudmila managed to lose the patrol in the maze-like ruins. Exhausted and with her heart pounding, she made her way back to the group. Her actions had saved them from discovery, but it had been a close call. Too close. The stress was immense. Lyudmila knew that the lives of her companions depended on her skill and judgment. Every decision, every shot, could mean the difference between life and death. She pushed herself to the limit, going days without sleep, her senses hyper-alert for any sign of danger. Food and water were scarce. They resorted to drinking from puddles, ignoring the risk of disease. Hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at their bellies and sapping their strength. Lyudmila shared what little food they could find equally among the group, often going without herself to ensure the children had enough to eat. Despite the harsh conditions, Lyudmila worked tirelessly to keep up the group's morale. She shared stories of her experiences, not the grim realities of war, but tales of courage and hope. She spoke of the beauty of Ukraine before the war, of the resilience of the Soviet people, and of her dreams for a peaceful future. Her words gave strength to the weary and hope to the desperate. One evening, as they huddled in the ruins of what had once been a school, Lyudmila overheard a conversation that touched her deeply. A young boy, no more than 10 years old, was whispering to his mother. "When I grow up," he said, "I want to be brave like Lyudmila." The mother hushed him, fearful of making noise, but Lyudmila felt a mix of pride and sadness. She was proud to inspire such courage, but saddened that children were being forced to think of bravery and war instead of play and laughter. As they moved through the city, Lyudmila's sniper skills were put to crucial use. She would scout ahead, eliminating threats before they could endanger the group. Each shot was carefully considered, not just for accuracy, but for the risk of drawing attention. She had to balance the immediate threat against the danger of revealing their position. One particularly tense moment came when they were crossing a wide street. Halfway across, They spotted a German machine gun nest in a building overlooking their position. The group froze, caught in the open. Lyudmila knew they had only seconds before they were spotted. With no time to take careful aim, she raised her rifle and fired rapidly, taking out the two gunners in quick succession. The group sprinted to safety as bullets from nearby German positions began to rain down around them. As the days wore on, Lyudmila's legend continued to grow. The survivors in her group spread whispered tales of her exploits. How she could hit a target at impossible ranges, how she moved like a ghost through the ruins, how her presence alone seemed to keep the enemy at bay. To them, she was more than a soldier. She was a guardian angel, a symbol of hope in their darkest hour. But the toll of leadership weighed heavily on Lyudmila. Each life lost under her protection was a personal failure in her eyes. She pushed herself harder, slept less, took greater risks. Her body was reaching its limits, but her iron will kept her going. She knew that to falter now would mean death for all those who depended on her. It was during this desperate time that Lyudmila's legend truly took shape. Despite the overwhelming odds, she managed to lead her group to safety, even adding to her tally of kills along the way. Her actions during these harrowing days would be spoken of in whispers of awe for generations to come. One of the most remarkable stories from this period involved Lyudmila's encounter with a German sniper who had been hunting her. As the group was making its way through a particularly dangerous area, Lyudmila sensed they were being watched. Using all her skill and intuition, she managed to spot the enemy sniper's position. What followed was a tense duel that lasted for hours. The two snipers played a deadly game of cat and mouse, each trying to outmaneuver the other. Lyudmila's group huddled in terror, knowing that their lives hung in the balance. Finally, as the sun was setting, Lyudmila saw her chance. The changing light had momentarily disrupted the German sniper's vision, and in that split second, Lyudmila took her shot. The enemy sniper fell, and a collective sigh of relief went through the group. But their ordeal was far from over. The gunshot had alerted nearby German patrols, and soon they could hear dogs barking in the distance. Lyudmila knew they had to move quickly. Despite her exhaustion, she led the group on a grueling night march, using every trick she knew to throw off their pursuers. As dawn broke, they found themselves at the edge of the Soviet lines. The sight of the red flag flying in the distance gave them renewed energy for the final push to safety. But it was here, within sight of their goal, that disaster struck. A German mortar team had spotted them. The first shell landed just meters away, showering them with debris. Lyudmila's training kicked in immediately. She shouted orders, directing the group to scatter and find cover. As more shells rained down, she realized that someone needed to deal with the mortar team or none of them would make it. Without hesitation, Lyudmila broke from cover and began to run towards a German position. Her group watched in awe as she dodged from ruin to ruin, bullets kicking up dust at her feet. When she was in range, she dropped to one knee, took aim, and fired 3 rapid shots. The mortar fell silent, but the cost of this final act of heroism was high. As Lyudmila turned to rejoin her group, a mortar shell that had already been in the air when she took out the team landed nearby. The explosion threw her several feet, leaving her with shrapnel wounds and a concussion. As she lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, she was certain that her war was over. The members of her group, people she had protected and led through hell, now became her saviors. Risking their own lives, they ran out under fire to drag her to safety. As Soviet soldiers rushed out to help, Lyudmila's last conscious thought was relief. She had fulfilled her duty. Her people were safe. Fortunately, her comrades managed to evacuate her from the city before it fell to the Germans. Lyudmila was taken to a field hospital, where she began the long process of recovery. The physical wounds were painful, but it was the emotional and psychological scars that ran deepest. The horrors she had witnessed, the lives she had taken, the constant stress of combat, all of these weighed heavily on her soul. As she recuperated, news of her exploits began to spread beyond the front lines. The story of how she had led a group of survivors through enemy lines, her incredible sniper duels, and her final heroic stand captured the imagination of the Soviet people. Lyudmila became a symbol of resistance, a hero in a time when heroes were desperately needed. The Soviet leadership, recognizing the potential propaganda value of her story, made the decision to withdraw her from combat. Lyudmila's war, at least on the front lines, was indeed over, but her impact on the conflict was far from finished. Recognized for her extraordinary service, Lyudmila was sent on a diplomatic mission to the United States. This marked a dramatic shift in her life, from the brutal realities of the Eastern Front to the glittering cities of America. She became the first Soviet citizen to be received by a U.S. president when she met with Franklin D. Roosevelt at the White House. The transition was not easy for Lyudmila. She struggled with the contrast between the luxury she encountered in America and the desperate conditions her comrades were still facing back home. The sound of car backfires would send her diving for cover, a reflex born from months of dodging enemy fire. The soft beds and abundant food felt almost obscene when she thought of the privations in Sevastopol. Yet, Lyudmila understood the importance of her new mission. Her task was to persuade America to open a second front against Nazi Germany, to relieve the pressure on the beleaguered Soviet forces. She threw herself into this new role with the same determination she had shown on the battlefield. Lyudmila's story captivated the American public. Here was a young woman, not much older than many of their own daughters and sisters, who had faced the horrors of war with unwavering courage. Her speeches drew massive crowds, and her no-nonsense responses to questions about her experiences left lasting impressions. One particular exchange became famous. When asked how she could bring herself to kill so many people, Lyudmila's response was as chilling as it was honest. "Don't you think that the Nazi soldiers have killed more than 300 Soviet citizens and children?" Her words cut through the abstraction of war, bringing home the brutal reality of the conflict raging in Eastern Europe. Lyudmila's tour of America was a whirlwind of speeches, interviews, and meetings with dignitaries. She spoke at workers' rallies, women's groups, and universities. Everywhere she went, she impressed people with her courage, her intelligence, and her unwavering commitment to her country's cause. One of the most significant moments of her tour came when she addressed the International Student Assembly in Washington, D.C., standing before a crowd of young people from around the world. Lyudmila spoke passionately about the sacrifices being made by Soviet youth in the fight against fascism. "I am 25 years old," she declared. "I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" Her challenge electrified the audience and made headlines across America. Here was a young woman calling out the men of the world's most powerful nation, shaming them into action. Lyudmila's words had a powerful impact. Her tour helped to shift American public opinion in favor of greater involvement in the European theater of war. While it would be an oversimplification to say that she alone was responsible for America's eventual decision to open a second front, her contribution was significant. Throughout her time in America, Lyudmila never forgot her comrades still fighting on the Eastern Front. In every speech, every interview, she reminded her audience of the desperate battle being waged against fascism. She spoke of the courage of Soviet soldiers, the sacrifices of civilians, and the urgent need for Allied support. As her tour came to an end, Lyudmila felt a mix of emotions. She was proud of what she had accomplished, but eager to return home. The luxuries of America, while appreciated, felt hollow compared to the camaraderie she had experienced on the front lines. She missed her homeland, her people, and even, in a strange way, the sense of purpose that came with defending her country. Before we continue with Lyudmila's story, if you're as captivated by her incredible journey as we are, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have many more tales of heroism and sacrifice from World War II that you won't want to miss. Upon her return to the Soviet Union, Lyudmila was hailed as a hero. Her exploits on the battlefield and her success in America had made her a national icon. But for Lyudmila, the adulation was bittersweet. She thought of the comrades she had lost, the horrors she had witnessed, and the long road to recovery that still lay ahead. As the war drew to a close, Lyudmila's legend only grew. She finished the war with 309 confirmed kills, making her the most successful female sniper in history and one of the top military snipers of all time. But the cost of her service was high. The physical and emotional toll of the war left deep scars that would never fully heal. After the war, Lyudmila completed her education and became a historian. She spent the rest of her life advocating for veterans' rights and sharing her experiences to ensure that the sacrifices of her comrades would never be forgotten. She wrote her memoirs, Lady Death, the memoirs of Stalin's sniper, which provided a gripping first-hand account of her wartime experiences. Lyudmila's post-war life was not without its challenges. Like many veterans, she struggled with the psychological aftermath of combat. The memories of the war never left her. She would often wake in the night, haunted by dreams of the battlefield. The faces of those she had killed, both enemy soldiers and the comrades she couldn't save, visited her in quiet moments. Despite these struggles, Lyudmila remained a strong and resilient figure. She channeled her experiences into her work as a historian, ensuring that the true story of the war, not just a sanitized official version, would be preserved for future generations. She became a respected voice in Soviet academic circles, known for her insightful analysis of military history and her unflinching honesty about the realities of war. Lyudmila also became an advocate for women's rights, using her fame to argue for greater opportunities for women in Soviet society. She often spoke about how the war had proven that women were capable of serving alongside men in even the most demanding roles. Her own story was a powerful testament to this fact. In her later years, Lyudmila became a mentor to young women in the military, sharing her knowledge and experiences. She was a frequent guest at military academies, where her lectures on sniper tactics and wartime strategy were always well attended. Even as she aged, the fire that had driven her during the war never dimmed. Lyudmila's personal life was marked by both joy and tragedy. She married a fellow veteran after the war and had a son. However, the marriage eventually ended in divorce, a common fate for many relationships strained by the aftermath of war. Despite this setback, Lyudmila found happiness again later in life, remarrying and enjoying a period of domestic tranquility that had been denied to her in her youth. As the years passed, Lyudmila watched the world change around her. The Cold War tensions between the Soviet Union and the West saddened her, as she remembered the spirit of cooperation she had experienced during her time in America. She often spoke out for peace and international understanding, drawing on her unique perspective as someone who had seen the worst of war and the best of international cooperation. When she passed away in 1974 at the age of 58, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was hailed as a hero of the Soviet Union. Her funeral was attended by thousands, including many of the soldiers she had fought alongside and the students she had taught. The Soviet government issued a commemorative stamp in her honor, ensuring that her image would continue to inspire future generations. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's legacy lives on, not just in the history books, but in the inspiration she provides to new generations. Her story challenges us to stand up for what's right, to persevere in the face of adversity, and to never underestimate the impact that one determined individual can have on the world. In a time of great darkness, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was a beacon of light, a symbol of resistance against tyranny. Her courage, skill, and unwavering commitment to her country and her comrades made her a true hero of World War II. As we face our own challenges in the modern world, we would do well to remember the lessons of her extraordinary life. The echoes of Lyudmila's rifle shots have long since faded, but the impact of her actions continues to resonate through time. She reminds us that in the face of evil, ordinary people can rise to become extraordinary heroes. And in doing so, they can change the course of history. Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story is more than just a tale of military prowess. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the courage to stand up against tyranny, and the power of one individual to make a difference in the face of overwhelming odds. Her life reminds us that heroes come in all forms and that in the darkest of times, extraordinary individuals can rise to meet the challenges before them. As we reflect on Lyudmila's incredible journey, we're reminded of the countless untold stories of bravery and sacrifice that shaped the course of World War II. Each one is a thread in the tapestry of human history, a reminder of the cost of freedom and the indomitable spirit of those who fight for it. In the annals of military history, few figures stand out as prominently as Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Her skill with a rifle was unparalleled, her courage in the face of danger unwavering, and her impact on the course of the war undeniable. But perhaps her greatest legacy is the inspiration she continues to provide to this day. Lyudmila's story serves as a powerful reminder of the role women have played in shaping history, often in the face of significant opposition and prejudice. She broke barriers and shattered stereotypes, proving that courage, skill, and determination know no gender. In doing so, she paved the way for future generations of women in military service and beyond. Her life also stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the horrors she witnessed and the physical and emotional toll of her wartime experiences, Lyudmila found the strength to rebuild her life after the war. She channeled her experiences into education and advocacy, ensuring that the lessons of history would not be forgotten. As we conclude our exploration of Lyudmila Pavlichenko's extraordinary life, we're left with a profound sense of admiration and respect. Her story is a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. It challenges us to ask ourselves, what would we be willing to do in defense of our beliefs and our loved ones? How can we contribute to making the world a better place, even in small ways? Lyudmila Pavlichenko's legacy is not just one of military achievement, but of human courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As we face our own challenges in the modern world, her story serves as an inspiration and a call to action. It reminds us that each of us has the potential to make a difference, to stand up for what's right, and to leave the world a better place than we found it. In the end, perhaps that is Lyudmila Pavlichenko's greatest victory. Not the enemy she defeated on the battlefield, but the lasting impact she has had on generations that followed. Her story continues to inspire, to educate, and to remind us of the true cost of war and the value of peace. As we look back on Lyudmila's life, we see a woman who was shaped by her times, but who also shaped them in return. Born into a world on the brink of massive change, she rose to meet the challenges of her era with courage, skill, and unwavering determination. Her journey from a young sharpshooter in Kiev to a decorated war hero and respected historian is a testament to the power of human potential. Lyudmila's experiences offer valuable lessons for our own time. In an age where conflicts still rage and injustice persists, her story reminds us of the importance of standing up for our beliefs, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It teaches us about the true nature of heroism, not as some unattainable ideal, but as a choice we can all make in our daily lives to act with courage and integrity. The complexities of Lyudmila's character also offer important insights. She was not a one-dimensional war hero, but a multifaceted human being who struggled with the moral implications of her actions. Her post-war advocacy for peace and her efforts to educate future generations about the realities of conflict show a deep understanding of the true cost of war. In this, she offers a nuanced perspective that is all too often lacking in our discussions of military conflict. Lyudmila's story also highlights the often overlooked contributions of women in wartime. While men's stories have dominated many historical narratives of World War II, women like Lyudmila played crucial roles both on and off the battlefield. Her achievements helped pave the way for greater recognition of women's capabilities in all spheres of life, challenging long-standing gender stereotypes and opening doors for future generations. As we consider Lyudmila's legacy, it's important to remember that she was one of many. Thousands of Soviet women served in combat roles during World War II, including nearly 2,000 women snipers. While Lyudmila's achievements were exceptional, they were part of a larger story of women's contributions to the war effort. Each of these women has a story that deserves to be told, a legacy that deserves to be honored. Lyudmila's post-war life also offers valuable lessons. Despite the trauma she had experienced and the challenges she faced in readjusting to civilian life, she found ways to continue serving her country and her ideals. Her work as a historian and her advocacy for veterans show that service to one's community and ideals doesn't end when the fighting stops. It's a lifelong commitment that can take many forms. In our modern world, where the nature of conflict has changed but the human cost remains high, Lyudmila's story is more relevant than ever. It challenges us to think critically about the use of military force, to consider the long-term impacts of war on individuals and societies, and to strive for diplomatic solutions to international disputes. At the same time, her life reminds us of the importance of being prepared to defend our values and our communities when necessary. Lyudmila didn't seek out war, but when it came to her homeland, she was ready to stand in its defense. Her story is a powerful reminder that ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges when called upon. As we near the end of our exploration of Lyudmila Pavlichenko's life, it's worth considering how her story might inspire us in our own lives. Few of us will ever face the kinds of challenges she did, but we all have opportunities to display courage, to stand up for what we believe in, and to make a positive difference in our communities. Perhaps we can honor Lyudmila's legacy by seeking out opportunities to serve others, by working to promote peace and understanding in our own spheres of influence, or by ensuring that the stories of those who have sacrificed for our freedoms are not forgotten. In doing so, we keep alive the spirit of courage and service that Lyudmila Pavlichenko embodied. If you've been moved by Lyudmila's story and want to learn more about the unsung heroes of World War II, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We have many more incredible tales of bravery and sacrifice to share. As we conclude, let's take a moment to reflect on the broader implications of Lyudmila Pavlichenko's life. Her story is not just about one woman's extraordinary achievements, but about the potential that lies within each of us to rise above our circumstances and make a difference in the world. Lyudmila's life spanned some of the most tumultuous years of the 20th century. She witnessed the birth of the Soviet Union, the horrors of World War II, the tensions of the Cold War, and the beginnings of the space age. Through it all, she remained committed to her ideals, adapted to changing circumstances, and never lost sight of her duty to her country and her fellow citizens. In many ways, Lyudmila Pavlichenko embodied the resilience and strength of the Soviet people during one of their darkest hours. Her achievements on the battlefield helped turn the tide against the Nazi invasion, while her diplomacy helped secure crucial American support for the war effort. After the war, her advocacy and educational work ensured that the sacrifices of her generation would not be forgotten. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of Lyudmila's legacy is the way she continues to inspire people around the world. Her story has been told in books, documentaries, and even feature films. Young women looking to break into male-dominated fields often cite her as a role model. Military personnel study her techniques and strategies. Historians value her first-hand accounts of key events in World War II. In a world that often seems divided and uncertain, Lyudmila Pavlichenko's life offers a powerful reminder of our shared humanity. Despite the differences in ideology that separated the Soviet Union from its Western allies, Lyudmila was able to connect with the American people on a human level during her tour of the United States. Her experiences remind us that even in times of conflict, our common hopes, fears, and aspirations unite us more than our differences divide us. As we face the challenges of the 21st century, from climate change to political polarization to ongoing conflicts around the world, we would do well to remember the lessons of Lyudmila's life. Her courage in the face of danger, her commitment to her principles, and her lifelong dedication to serving others provide a blueprint for how we might approach our own challenges. Moreover, Lyudmila's story reminds us of the importance of preserving and sharing the stories of those who have come before us. In an age of rapid change and instant communication, it's easy to lose sight of the lessons of history. But by remembering and honoring figures like Lyudmila Pavlichenko, we gain valuable perspective on our own times and challenges. As we come to the end of our journey through Lyudmila Pavlichenko's remarkable life, we're left with a sense of awe at her achievements and a deep appreciation for her sacrifices. But more than that, we're left with a challenge: to live up to the example she set, to face our own battles with courage and determination, and to never underestimate the impact that one dedicated individual can have on the world. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was many things: a soldier, a scholar, a diplomat, an advocate. But above all, she was a human being who chose to stand up for what she believed in, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. In doing so, she not only changed the course of history, but left a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us today. As we look to the future, let us carry with us the spirit of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, her courage, her dedication, her humanity. Let us strive to make our own positive mark on the world, to stand up for what's right, and to never forget the power we each hold to make a difference. In the end, that may be Lyudmila Pavlichenko's greatest legacy. Not just what she achieved in her own lifetime, but what she continues to inspire in others. Her life stands as a testament to the indomitable human spirit and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always the possibility of heroism, always a chance to change the world for the better. And so, as we close this chapter on the extraordinary life of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, we open a new one, our own stories, our own opportunities to make a difference. May we face them with the same courage, determination, and humanity that defined the life of the woman who became known as Lady Death, but who in truth was a powerful force for life, for freedom, and for the enduring strength of the human spirit. Yendi.